So I just said, universe, I'm a business guy, I'm an acting guy. I have no idea how all that's going to mold together, but I also want to do like a Steve Owen where I'm just dedicating myself to the voiceless. And for me, survivors, don't know what it's going to look like, but take me to where you need to go. And that was 6 years ago. And here I am.
Perry, welcome to the Creators for Change podcast.
Hello, how are we doing?
We are doing great. Perry, I was telling you before this, I probably spent the last 2 hours going through your content, hearing about your story. I have to say, I am extremely inspired. I mean, you went from this trauma, this hardship, and taking that mess and making it into such a beautiful movement and message. This is to inspire the audience. You went from that to creating a community, writing a book, keynote speeches, publishing company, list goes on, and here you are about to create a film. So, Perry, it's really inspiring, especially coming from someone who started their brand after discovering they were abused as a child. With that in mind, Perry, for those who might be new to your work, could you give us a glimpse into your story and how that journey evolved into the film you're now bringing to life?
Thank you for the compliments. You're making me blush. I wasn't expecting it. In short, I am a survivor myself. I was abused by my step granddad. It was a familial situation that went on. When a stop was put to it, my dad told me to stay quiet about it. That's where the ball of the trauma really started to roll, that silence. I say this a lot about trauma survivors. If we've been through something, it doesn't have to specifically be childhood sexual abuse. It can be anything traumatic for that person. Then we know what it's like to be in that situation. If we make it through the other side, maybe not completely, we'll start to shift towards, I don't want anybody else to go through it. I don't want anyone else to be drowning in silence, battling the shame because I know what it's like because I was there myself and maybe I might still be a little bit there. That transition happened to me along the way. We were talking about this earlier about the universe. And I just said, universe, I'm a business guy, I'm an acting guy. I have no idea how all that's going to mold together, but I also want to do like a Steve Owen where I'm just dedicating myself to the voiceless. And for me, survivors, don't know what it's going to look like, but take me to where you need to go. And that was 6 years ago. And here I am.
It's so interesting how that journey unraveled because you said it was really holding in the silence that caused the trauma to really fester. So, was it like the trauma itself, or more so like holding it in that caused the most pain?
For me, looking back, when I look at the abuse that I went through at the time as a child, I wouldn't categorize it as a traumatic experience for me when I was younger. It was more, he groomed me, he positioned himself as a hero in my story, and I idolized the guy. It wasn't necessarily a traumatic experience. The trauma came for me when I was living in silence and I didn't feel like I could ever speak about it. As the years went on, that started to really pile up and compound when sex, sexual abuse, masculinity, toxic masculinity, how to be a man, how not to be a man. My head's in the middle of all of this. And that was the compounding effect of living in silence.
I'm excited to unpack this deeper so that people listening can take their own mess and make that into a message and a movement as well. In this conversation, we're going to move through the same process that guides our entire movement. We call it the Creators for Change pathway. It starts with Awaken. We're going to explore the experiences and shifts that shaped how you are now. And then we're going to move into Activate, how you turned your voice into action. Finally, Amplify, the ripple effect of your work and the vision you're building. With that in mind, let's start with part one, Awakening. In your case, this is breaking the silence. So, what was life like before you told your story? And what made you finally speak?
Before I told my story, it was the nitty-grittiness of the relationship I had with my dad. I say a lot now that I've got a lot of daddy issues and a lot of, if we're talking about like how we're still fucked up today as adults, for me, it doesn't come from the trauma with my granddad. It came from the relationship I had with my dad. And he was my best friend at the same time, especially as the years got on, he became an alcoholic and he was depressed and became very spiteful because in his eyes, I was his only friend. I was the only person in his life. That it sounds great, but at the same time, if I don't message him back after 5 minutes, it used to be horrific. We could categorize it under verbal abuse, emotional abuse from my dad towards me. That really took its effect as the years went on, and I started to push myself away from him. At the time, I was a personal trainer, so I had a rigorous daily routine, heavily into work. I still am now, but at the time, I'd probably into working out for the wrong reasons, more from the ego side and trying to make up for things that I lacked within. Whereas now for me, it's more like a personal anchor rather than an attachment to ego. But I was in that routine of being a personal trainer. I had my ex-girlfriend, we had a dog, and then we had my dad blowing up my phone every now and then. And also every now and then he'll come around to the house to bitch about something, but he was drunk. So my dad was a drunk. To answer your question in regards to what made me actually start to speak out, was June 1st, 2017, a text message from my brother. And it was an image of an ambulance van outside the house. And it was another image of my dad lying on a bed with a paramedic standing next to him. I'm thinking the worst thing. I call him up. My stepmom answers the phone. And she's like, "Oh, don't worry, Travis, my brother, shouldn't have sent them to you. Like, nothing to worry about." She's like, "Basically, Perry, he's had an issue with his blood levels due to his diabetes. So the paramedics said they're going to take him to the hospital, even out his blood levels, and then we're going to pick him up." About 45 minutes later, an hour later, and they get another call from my stepmom telling me that my brother telling me that my dad had passed away. He essentially had a heart attack in the ambulance van on the way to the hospital, and he was 48 years old. And that was huge for me because it wasn't like I hated the guy. I loved him dearly. We were best friends, but the person he had become left a lot of cracks in the mold that we had. As time went on, a few months later, I felt naturally that weight was starting to shift a little, and I started to edge closer towards confronting the very thing that I've been running away from all those years, the abuse. That kid living in the silence, my dad telling me to stay silent, basically stop running and confronting the past. I felt that starting to come a little bit closer. And then one day I see an interview with Lewis Howes, and Lewis Howes talks about his book, Mask of Masculinity, and he says about how he was raped by, I think it was a neighbor or someone, when he was a child, and he grew up wearing these masks. And that was the very first time that someone had articulated it in a certain way, and me being at a certain stage where I was ready to listen, I was ready to see, and it just compounded. And I was like, Jesus, okay. I remember sitting with it, and I was like, what am I going to do about it? And then the only thing that came to me was, when Abby, my girlfriend at the time, when she comes home from work, you're going to ask her, hey, let's go on a walk with the dog, and you're going to tell her. And I had just heard that voice in my head. She came home from work and said, hey, do you want to come on a walk with me, River Mara? We go on a walk. I don't remember a single word that I said on that walk. I remember how I felt, right? I think it's Brene Brown that says about vulnerability is like standing outside with everyone staring at you, butt naked. And that's kind of how it felt. But she welcomed me with open arms. I say that I broke my silence in 3 stages. Stage 1 was to her. Stage 2 was to a smaller group of people. And then stage 3 was social media.
That's powerful. I'm glad that you shared the stages because there's people listening now who likely want to share that story. And this is a good message for them that you don't have to do it all at once. You could do it through stages and ease into it.
And just to quickly say on that, I don't even advise people to do what I've done in regards to, if you've been living in silence, if you've been living in silence for 26 years and you've barely confronted that truth, and then the time that you want to confront that truth, you're like, I'm going to tell my partner, I would even advise against that because you have no idea how your partner's going to react. We talk like a worst case scenario where your partner's like, why didn't you tell me? Why haven't you told me all these years? Which is negative. Or they're like, I don't believe you, whatever. But we come over to this side where they are supportive, they are loving. However, the bombshell has been dropped on them and they pause for a bit too long. They're trying to think about how they should respond to you in the best way. But then you read into that length of pause and you're like, oh no, she's thinking the worst thing. She's thinking horrible things. And all of a sudden you start to associate the very first time that you've spoken out with this rejection. And if we are so vulnerable for that very first time of speaking out, and we do want validation, we do want approval, we do want to be believed, I think that's natural. However, if you can break the silence to yourself first in as many different ways as possible, then on step 16, on step 21, then you tell your partner, you're going to be telling them from a completely different place.
For the people listening, This is my advice. I remember when I broke my silence, I didn't follow the advice that you just shared. I told people before I fully broke it to myself, and I was resentful of their reactions. However, I've learned to forgive them because it's a lot of weight on someone and their brain's trying to process it. Maybe they've never heard of it before or they don't know how to respond. You can't always blame people for that. People are people, and I'm sure many of them tried the best that they could anyway. But that's the way I see it. Do you have anything to add to that?
The more time, as the years stack on of me doing this and being on this path, there's one thing just knowing, oh, but there's so many survivors out there. There's one thing just knowing that without tangible proof. And then there's tangible proof, as in like your neighbor, the person in the grocery store who saw you online and says, hey, me too. When you go to a birthday party when there's only 20 people there and two people break their silence to you, like that type of thing. We like, oh, it's everywhere type of thing. Then you're like, everyone's got trauma. And then it starts to make you see it from, you can't put blame onto anyone with how they respond because who knows what trauma they've got that they haven't even looked into. We just don't know the trauma that someone has, especially when we know that most people have trauma.
100%. You worded that so beautifully. And what I really love about you, Perry, is that it's like a domino effect happened. I actually heard Lewis's podcast where he shared the detailed story of what he experienced and it inspired you. So it's like we're creating this domino effect, like a chain of healing. We're breaking the chain of trauma and creating this domino effect of healing because it allows other people to speak their truth. They feel seen and heard. That happened to me as well. When I started sharing, I got so many Me Too's. And I was so shocked because you don't see just the statistic. You're seeing a good friend or a good neighbor right in front of you telling you the story. And I think it creates this healing, this unity, especially for men, because I think a lot of it's interesting. I find that when people are faced with this trauma, they could either hold it in or they could break the silence. The people who choose to break the silence, it's really valuable to share your own experiences. You share that you were working out. That was your way to deal with it, to put your energy somewhere else. And so maybe some people are taking on coping mechanisms and they don't even realize it. It's just something that they thought that they're doing, but there's a deeper motivation behind it. Something else I want to ask you, Perry, is, and again, I was really inspired by you sharing your story, but it also made me think, man, like he must have had so many fears going into that. So, what fears did you have about going public with something so personal?
Looking back, the two fears that came up, they're very similar. And they both come back to the first fear. The very first time I did my video and put it onto social media, I didn't even think about my family watching it. It just never crossed my mind. The fear was about how I was going to be perceived, which we all know we can't control. It took me 7 takes to do the video because if I start crying, I don't want people to see me cry. And when I put my book out a few years later, I said to myself, I want to go all in trying to get media coverage. And I did a great job of getting media coverage. I was in a national newspaper and everything. And I remember before all of that really started to take off, it didn't happen before the book, but it happened before the media press coverage. I wonder what the family of my step granddad, the abuser, his family, what they're going to think, what they're going to say. Not my immediate family. Because I have a very strong, and it's daddy issues. I have a very strong, there's some good daddy issues that I want to hold on to, which is very much a fuck it mentality. I don't care what you think. I'm just doing it. Don't care about the repercussions. That has helped a lot of times. There's still some negative comments on my stuff. I don't really care because I know the good that it's doing doesn't even compare. It just impacting one person's life. Even if there was 1,000 negative comments, I remember thinking, his family, what are they going to think? What are they going to say? I hadn't seen them. I don't even remember what any of them looked like because I was a child. The abuse stopped when I was 11 and I never saw him again. He died years later from a heart attack at work, my step granddad. I never saw his family. I did technically, but I don't remember them. So I was like, oh, they're too distant. I'm not going to hear anything. A couple of weeks later, I get a message on Facebook from his daughter. The beginning of the message was like, hey, Perry, it is so-and his daughter. I remember reading that first sentence and I threw the phone down because it was a long message. I just threw the phone down and literally the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I was like, oh my God. And now in here, I'm like, worst case scenario, what is she doing? Okay, cool. So she's saying that she's going to get a lawyer. She's going to do something, take it all down. You're lying and defamation, all going on inside my head. And I remember being like, fuck it. If she wants me to go down, I'm going down swinging. Let's go. So I pick up the phone, fully ready to go down swinging. And I continue reading past that first sentence, and it says, just to let you know, you have the full support of the family because he abuses us too.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God. And she's like, I'm going to read your book. I remember saying to her, this is about your dad. You want to read this book? She's like, it'll be a tough read, but yes, we want to read it. I ended up meeting up with them in London in the park. And me and my cousin was also, I always knew about my cousin being abused by him. But me and Kelly met up with them in the park and we had a full conversation about them, what happened to them, and then also the story of my step granddad. That's where our connection of the generational trauma and the generational silence.
That sounds really healing, that
Mm.
whole experience. It's almost like the universe supported you and lifted you up. I have to ask because I'm sure there's people listening and maybe they didn't have such a great experience with that. Maybe family members reached out to them, totally bashed them, or maybe they have that fear going into it. What advice would you give to those people where they break the silence, but then family members come back and they just don't support it? They're very negative.
First of all, I won't sugarcoat it. It's going to be tough. It's going to be one hell of a ride for you listening, if that is going to happen. And if you think that could happen, then I'll be truthful. There is a chance that might happen. If you're already thinking it, then maybe there's a reason why, because they've shown proof that they might not support you if you were to speak out. What I will say is, in Powerful Books, which is my publishing company, we got nearly 80 trauma survivors in there, 20 books published at the moment. And when people publish their book, most of them, some people start marketing their story whilst they're writing because they start to become that person that really wants to speak out. But most of the time is once they publish their book and they put the book out there, then they start to market their story on social media, share story reels, just like I do. There are a handful of people in our community we talk about all the time on the calls and in the WhatsApp chat where their families don't support them. The first person that comes to mind is Jocelyn. Jocelyn was abused, sexually abused, but also had a narcissistic mother. Her mum is still alive today. She's not a nice woman. Jocelyn was like, with my book going out, how do I protect myself? Because I know she's going to come after me. And she did. She created multiple accounts and left one-star reviews on her book on Amazon. And there's been family members that has sided. Narcissistic people are very smart. They know how to rally the troops and manipulate them. That's an example of, yes, it can happen. But here is what I'm going to caveat that with. That is not a reason to stay silent. If you stay silent to keep your family together, to keep them loving you, to keep them accepting you, then really they're not your family in the first place. Family shouldn't come with conditions. It's unconditional love. And what you have to do is, it's not going to happen overnight, but you need to mull on that. The key here is making the purpose greater than the fears, because family could exile me. Yes, they could. But what's the purpose as to why I'm doing this? This message needs to get out there. Coming back to Simon Sinek, come back to the why, always saying the why. And eventually you will get to the root of that why. Once you know what that why is, nothing will permanently stop you.
That's really powerful. And it's really powerful for the people listening because there's that fear. It's like jumping off a cliff. Am I going to be supported or am I going to have to deal with this backlash? To remember why you're doing this. And I love what you said about family is about unconditional love. If I were to give a personal definition, family, unconditional love.
Mhm.
Relatives, conditional love. Generational healing, I believe, is a choice with every individual. No one can force you to heal. And Perry, you had a great experience with your family coming together, talking and healing. How does family reaction shape your understanding of generational trauma?
The lack of action, the lack of support, the lack of speaking out as a family is the proof there that there is an underlying problem here. When I put the video out, which was the third stage of breaking my silence, I spoke out. I find out from my auntie that when I went round there, she's like, I watched your video, and she goes, you weren't the only one that was abused. And I said, Kelly was too. And Kelly was sitting there, which is her daughter. She goes, it wasn't just you and Kelly. She goes, it was me and it was your dad. And that's when I found that out before finding out about my step granddad and his story. That was the first thing. That really was like, okay, I'm cool. I'm dead. This is my purpose. I'm dedicating my life to those people who don't have a voice. And That's when I start to see all the dots connect. It's like, okay, cool. So my dad told me to stay silent because he was living in silence. And as the years went on, there is a harsh truth to this, which people always remind me, which is, why did your dad let you go around there if he knew what type of man he was? You know, and that is a true question. I can't ask him, but that's a very truthful question. And I don't think it's a black and white answer, especially if he was buried in his own trauma where he didn't want to, him saying, Perry, you're not going around there anymore. He then has to confront what he went through. He wasn't prepared to do that. So he tried to allow me to go around there in a way where he thought I was protected, like always having someone around the house. But my step granddad was abusing me in a room when my stepmom was sitting in the same room, everyone watching TV. He used to get a freak on when the whole could be caught. That actually was how it was caught because my stepmom was like, what's going on over there in the corner? She brought it up and took me out of the room, took me home. Then my dad confronted me and questioned me, and I told him what he was doing to me. And then finding out from his side of the family that my step granddad went to a boarding school in Ireland run by the brothers. It's an institution. All the kids there were abused by the priests. They're all abused by the brothers there, and they used to use abuse as a punishment. It's really gone through the generations. My step granddad abused a bunch of people. Has his cute kids abused anyone else? I can't confidently say yes or no. Never know what happens behind closed doors. I think so. My dad didn't abuse me, so the abuse ended with him. But the silence trickled down. I believe that's where the real pain is. It was a silence that made my dad drink himself to death before the age of 50. When you start to share your own story and be the person within the family that starts to create that change, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes that trickle happens within that family and they start to open up too. And you realize the depths of what actually happened.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to it because,
Yeah.
like you said, your father didn't abuse you, but he was silent. And then there's layers to breaking the silence within your family. Now you do it on social media, which is a whole bigger depth. That transitions us into part two of this, which is activate. I want to hear more, Perry, about how you turned this story into service. There's a few things I want to cover, like your book, your community, and social media, especially. Let's start with your book, Breaking the Silence. This book reached so many people. What kind of impact have you seen since sharing it publicly?
I'm a big believer that the biggest way you can impact a mass amount of people, or even just one person, is through a story, right? Visual, cinematic story. I'm doing it now by Instagram Reels, which is my own version of it. But when it comes to writing a book and putting a book into someone's hands, that stays with them. There might be practical things in there that can really stay with them and go on that journey with them. The way that I structured the book, part one is my story, part two is the story of 14 other survivors. The last page in part two, which is story number 15, is where the reader can get a pen and write their story into the book so they can become the 15th survivor. So it feels like they're breaking a silence to themselves inside that book. And then part three is the steps that one can take to break their silence. So when I put that book out there, there was a lot of people that said, hey, read your book, broken my silence, read your book, so many similarities. It showed me that I remember before I put that book out there, I was like, I've shared my story on social media a gazillion times. And that was 6 years ago, and I'm still doing it. So it doesn't matter how many times you share it. And I was like, how else can I get it out there? What else can I do? I don't really remember how writing a book came into my mind. The only thing I can put it down to, and we talked about this before the call, I don't know if you've read The Creative Act by Rick Rubin.
I have it.
It's like my Bible. I read it all the time. It's a phenomenal book. It's about how all of us are artists and how all of us need to tap into how we want to organically show up to something without showing up under the pretense of societal rules and how it should be done. That's how I approach life before I even read the book. I'm writing the second book now. When did I start it? I have no idea. This film ends with me. How did I come up with the name? No idea. The log line? No idea. I'm listening to this meditation at the moment, Bob Proctor's, an old one. I remembered it last week. I used to listen to it years ago. And I was like, I should get back into touch with that and start listening to it. For anybody listening, Bob Proctor's Abundance Meditation on YouTube is 20, 21 minutes long. It's fantastic. He talks about how we're vessels, and it's talking about abundance. We are vessels. Things flow through us. That's the best way that I can put it down to the work that I'm doing and how it's creating this ripple effect. How did it happen? No idea. But the universe flowed through me to create that book. And It's done a great job since releasing it for sure.
I can second that for the people listening. And this is to inspire everyone about what's possible when you break the silence and tap into your purpose and your creativity. It's like you said, I see it like things are being channeled. Like I
Mm,
come up with ideas that didn't even feel like my own. It felt like someone gave them to me. I
mm.
don't remember coming up with my brand name, Ari the Creator. I don't remember coming up with Creators for Change. The ideas just came to me, and then you work with it and it evolves with you. There's something really magical with just being aligned. I think what also comes into play is giving. Tony Robbins talks about how the secret to living is giving. Whenever I give, things come back, but I never expect it. Like I give and things just come back. If
Mm.
anyone wants to try this out for themselves, Perry has a link down below. You can contribute to this film he's putting together and experience the magic for yourself.
And you talk about Tony Robbins. I remember sitting in the car back when I was a personal trainer, and I had this CD in my car that my mentor gave to me. It was a Tony Robbins CD. He talked about how he went into a restaurant and there was a kid in there with his mum. His mum went to the toilet and Tony gave him the money, and it was his last bit of money that he had to his name to say, buy your mum dinner. And he got a check through the mail or something. He wasn't expecting it. If you're expecting it, it's not going to come. If you just give the abundance, basically, that's what it is. That abundance mindset, energy, it
Yeah.
ebbs and flows.
100%. And this is good for the people listening. If you're planning on breaking your silence or you already have, if you align with this, you don't need to worry about, oh, should I write a book? Oh, should I create a community or a film? It's like that stuff is revealed to you. When I had my epiphany that I was a survivor, I remember that story from Tony, and I actually bought a homeless man a sandwich. Wasn't expecting anything, but I got a COVID relief fund from my university, and then I put that towards starting up my brand. I'm glad, Perry, that you've experienced that too in your own journey. Something I want to transition to is your community. I think
Mm.
community is really powerful and especially important in this niche. What kind of community have you built around this message, and how has that experience shaped you as a creator and a leader?
The community is made up predominantly of trauma survivors. That could be sexual abuse, it could be narcissistic abuse, it could be cancer survivors, it could be someone who lost a husband and rebuilding themselves through that grief. And it's just crazy the people that I attract. I've attracted about 500,000 social media followers to my profile to see the content that I'm producing and probably vicariously living through me as well. There's probably lots of people that I wish I could break my silence. And then I got the Facebook group, which the Facebook group's got about 5,000 people in there. And that's just, I'm not overly active in that. That's mainly just a space for people just ask questions like, hey, I'm going through court at the moment. Anybody, more of a practical support group. And then we have the very engaged community, which is the powerful books community, and that's where people are on there to do two things: to find healing, but also to change the world. If I can help one person, then maybe everything that I've been through is worthwhile. I believe you attract those types of people when you show up as that person yourself. I'm 30 now, and Powerful Books launched 2 years ago. I've been working with survivors probably 5, 6 years. I stepped into online entrepreneurship when I was 19, so 11 years ago. Whenever I had these businesses, like I was a personal trainer, then I eventually switched to being an online fitness coach, helping fitness trainers grow their business through storytelling. But I stopped being a PT, right? I stopped it to change that focus. But with this, and I say this guys to the guys all the time, that I'm helping you guys to write your book and to change the world with your story, but you best believe I'm doing that myself every single day. You know, I'm working on my second book, going across countries to speak on stages to inspire people to break their silence. And that's like, that's what happens when you tap into your purpose. When you tap into your purpose, you're not just, all right, I'm closing the book. That's not how it works. And that's what made me really be like, it's coming back to what you was talking about just then. Should I write a book? Should I launch a charity? Should I do this? Should I do that? I've been there so many times, and what I found is if you completely let go of all of that, because all of that might come, who knows in what order. But when you let go, I'm like, what is next? The universe will tell you whenever you're ready for it. I say to people who are writing a book, the book will be ready when you're ready. When you're ready, that's when the door opens up, and that's not a rush. The healing process for survivors is not a race. Who knows how long it will take for you to be that person that can do it?
I love what you said. You don't just talk the talk, you walk the walk. You're not just guiding people towards writing their book, you're actively doing it yourself. You're actively reaching more people on social media. It's really inspiring. And it makes me want to transition into talking about social media because you, Perry, have grown a large and engaged following. I know a lot of people listening, if they're just deciding to post on social media, my concern is, you know how these algorithms work. Maybe they post a few things and they don't get the views or the comments and they still don't feel seen and heard. So, what advice do you have for that, both from a motivation standpoint, but also how do we become seen with these algorithms?
A very difficult thing because you're bang on there, which is if you live the life where you are unheard and unseen, and then you decide to break your silence and you find your voice, and then you really are stepping up with this courage, and you're like, I'm writing a book now. I want to go on social media, share my story. There is obviously a big part of you that wants to help people. So if you put something out and then it gets 2 views, it happens. I get this from people, especially in our community when they just published a book and they got a brand new social media profile. And they start posting for a week and they come back on the next week's call. Perry, I don't know if I can do this. I'm getting like 3, 4, 5 views. It depends on the person, but I always go down like either path one, which is okay. So if we got 4 views, that's 4 people. That could be 4 survivors. And if you help just one of those people to break their silence or to move closer to breaking their silence, isn't that worth it? And all you did was do one video, right? You have to change the lens of how you're seeing this. I didn't do this to go viral. The virality came. I remember the very first time I went viral, and it was the millionth video that I put on social media. I was on holiday, I was on a sun lounger, right? And I did this video. It's just always the next. What's the next video? What's the next video? I didn't even look at the view count because I know it can just help one person. And then that was just my next video, and it just popped. I was like, holy shit, this is great. It's popping. And then you can start to shift the hat that you're wearing. I looked at it, I'm like, interesting. Why did I go viral on that one, but not the rest? That was a picture-based one. Now, loads of my viral reels, if anybody goes into my Instagram, you will see that they follow a specific trend, right? It's picture-based with text overlaid with a song in the background. It tells a story for a timeline. The algorithm told me that is what it needs. That's why I go viral with that, right? But I got there after years of posting, and I want to make this very clear to people. I got that after years of posting. So that's one path, which is if it's 4 people, that's 4 survivors. The other path is don't even look at the view count. You're doing this for you. And believe me, you need to think, okay, for the next 30 days, even for the next 3 to 6 months, I'm just posting for me because I need to become the person that is comfortable sharing their story visibly. I'm comfortable being seen. And that won't come after 1 week because if you are going to be pumped up by massive views, that's great. But then that means you're vulnerable to the opposite happening, which is feeling like shit if you get no views. You have to be in the middle and be nonchalant about either end, which means that you probably just need to do this for you. And in 6 months' time, that version of you, then we'll be looking at this from a completely different angle.
Wow, you were really consistent with many different formats. You tried different things. And then when something did pop, you just doubled down on that.
Yeah, and I wasn't looking for the video to pop. For example, if I'm sitting here and I feel like talking to the camera, I'll just talk to the camera and put that video on Instagram. It was intuitive and just creating whatever I felt. And then when I found the one that popped, I'm like, okay, I can still do the spontaneous types of different content. However, maybe just do that 20, 30% of the time and 80 to 70% of the time, do the one that actually pops.
How did it feel when a video finally popped? I would imagine that it was very healing. You felt seen and heard, but how was it for you?
My head got bigger than it already was. I was high on life. It was fantastic. It was the amount of DMs, usually short paragraphs just saying me too in their own words. And it made me be like, it's an interesting thing because you see a name in the inbox and it's just text on a screen and there's a small profile photo. It can be very hard to not look past that and just see it as that person on the screen, maybe not responding, whatever it is. The point I'm getting at is when you see all of that, especially when it's in abundance, when you get like 1,000 DMs, what I had to train myself to do was to anchor myself in on every single DM as if it's the only DM in the world I've ever gotten. That very person has broken their silence to me for the first time. And I need to respond to them, break the silence to yourself first in as many different ways as possible, all that sort of stuff. So there's probably a lot of vulnerability, a lot of pressure. I learned my lesson a while ago. Before that video blew up on Facebook, I blew up on TikTok. That was the first app I ever blew up on. I started to blow up on it. Then probably for about a year, maybe a year and a half, I'd never posted on there. I think I just went for a rough patch and just didn't post on there. And then after that, I hardly go viral on there. But TikTok was the first time I ever went viral. And that messed me up because it was crazy. But I had so many people reach out to me from TikTok and they didn't DM me on TikTok. I'm pretty sure at the time you couldn't DM unless you were following each other. Now it's different. But at the time, they had to go onto my Instagram and DM me. I didn't get back to anyone because I've seen these people in the DMs and I felt the pressure. And I was like, I can't heal you. I don't have a magic wand. What do you want me to say? I was really beat up about that. It took me a couple of months to realize they're not looking for me to magically heal their wounds. They're just looking for me to listen and to give a platform for them to be heard and to be seen, which is probably something that they're not used to. And then that's when it really changed and shifted how I saw these DMs. You were just saying, thank you so much for sharing your story with me and how are you feeling? Asking them how they're feeling, how they're doing. It's crazy how many people don't get that in their own lives. For someone to actually care about them deeply without being superficial. Social media is lovely, but definitely as the survivor who's got so many wounds and sometimes wounds that you aren't even aware of until something needs to happen for you to be aware of it. It's just about just make sure that you're keeping yourself in check. You got your own anchors because it's very easy to fall into this. I need to respond to everyone. And if I don't, I'm a shit person, leaving them hanging. That's a different problem you got to deal with. But what I will say is that's a privileged place to be in for a survivor to be blown up on social media. And there's a big journey to go on before that happens.
You solve one problem, you get the views and the followers, and then it opens up this whole other.
Is
Some people take on that weight and they think it's their job to heal people, but a lot of those people just want support or someone to listen to. I think you do
yeah.
a really good job at standing in your leadership. In summary, you talked about Instagram and TikTok. I've seen that you post some YouTube videos, but is there any one platform in particular that has really helped you amplify your message and get it out there?
Yeah, Instagram, hands down, all day long. It's not even close. For me, there's many different avenues to my vision. It's not just the publishing company. It's also the mark I want to make in the film industry as a filmmaker, but also as an actor. There's many different aspects to where I am and where I'm going. And the reason why Instagram works beautifully well is because everyone's on Instagram. And you have people that use it professionally, like in a TV and film world, and you also have the mum down the street that uses Instagram for personal reasons. And what I found with Instagram is that it has completely blown open the doors to not just survivors following me and reaching out, but also to professional people, to TV and film people, to those types of contacts actually being privy to what I'm doing and the mark that I'm making. So it's been great across different areas.
Thank you for sharing that because for the people listening, maybe you've posted content, maybe you don't feel seen and heard. Maybe try posting on a new platform. Maybe try mixing it up. I one time interviewed one of the top YouTube entrepreneurs, and he said a reason why a lot of people don't blow up is just because they don't mix it up. So they don't try different things, they don't try different platforms. And so it's something to try because oftentimes people are just posting one type of content on one platform, wondering why they're not blowing up. Thank you, Perry, for sharing all that. And now I want to talk about part three of this, which is amplify, building a movement, which you're already doing. But in particular, I want to dive deeper into this film, this next chapter that you're heading to. So, what inspired you to bring this story into a full-length film?
So my very first vision was sitting in front of a TV as a child and thinking to myself, I want to be on that. I had no idea that acting was a thing, but it was just this energy. I'd just been like, I want to be on that. That progressed to me chasing the acting dream. That did lead me down the traditional path where you have an agent and they send you to these commercials to try and get seen. Because if you can get seen over here, then maybe you can go over here. And I always hated that way of doing things. I don't need to be a starving artist in order to try and make it. There was always like, but Perry, you got to earn your stripes. If you want to be in these big movies, you got to earn your stripes to get there. Maybe, but not in the way that you think. I remember I was living on my auntie's couch. I had a part-time job in a call center trying to make it as an actor. How long am I going to go on doing this for? I don't even have a bed. I'm on a couch. And I'm like, this isn't it. And again, with daddy issues, I never liked having a boss. I never liked having to ask if I can go for lunch. In the call center, you had to ask if you can take a piss, and like it back in school. I hated all of that. I'm like, what do I need to do? You need to work for yourself, Perry. I was like trying to figure that out. And then I became that personal trainer. And I was like, I'm going to spend my 20s, because I was 19 going on 20s. I'm going to spend my 20s to try and build a business where it can give me the freedom to act. I thought I'd be a millionaire within 2 years. Never happened. Only when I was 28, 9 years after starting that journey, did I find powerful books. Now I'm like, okay, I'm getting somewhere I can have some freedom to think about what am I actually on this planet to do. And I'm already doing it with powerful books, but what else is part of that mission? And I always knew, and I had this vision once where I was sitting in an office and I had all of these screenplays, these scripts, and I was flicking through, and I had this sort of attachment to them, whereas like I had created them in a way, and I didn't know what that looked like. Then said to me, "Hey, Perry, you've published your book. Can you help me write mine?" I didn't say yes straight away, but then it all clicked. I'm like, if I can create a production company where I'm known to create true story films, how can I create those films? Like, how can I create an ecosystem where I'm generating my own films? The publishing company. If I can help trauma survivors write autobiographical books, memoirs, true stories that are inspiring, then eventually, when the timing is right, I could start turning them into films. That's why 2 years ago I started the publishing company because of that vision. Now I got into a stage where 2 years later, I'm like, you know what? I'm ready. The first film needs to be my one. And like I'm putting a fundraising together. I've been working on the script for probably nearly 2 years. It just never got anywhere. I was like, the script doesn't really feel like it's it 100%. I parked it to one side, allowed the universe to take over. And then one day I'm like, I'm going to reapproach this. This was only a couple of months ago. I wrote the whole script in a week. It's completely about the relationship between my story and my dad. The first script wasn't about the relationship between me and my dad. This is about you and your dad. This is about generational silence. This is the message that we need to get out there. Breaking that generational silence that's haunted that family for a very long time. And now it's about steamrolling ahead. We've got a co-producer on board. We're raising funds and we're going to get cracking, rocking and rolling.
I love it. It almost feels like it already happened. Like when I'm talking to
Yeah.
you, when you said you were little, you said that you knew you wanted to be on TV. You already have the book company, and it just makes sense that this is like a stepping stone. It feels like it already happened. I don't know if you feel that way, but
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking to ChatGPT this morning and I said to it last night, I said, listen, I'm tired of always calling you ChatGPT. I said, what's your name? And it's called me River. I'm like, great. All right. So I was speaking to River this morning and I have a specific thread in there where I'm like, you're my life coach. If I ever had any questions, as I just talk to me. And this morning it said to me, so funny. This has already happened. All of this, like the way that you're talking about it, it's already happened. We're just waiting for it to catch up. And I'm like, that's exactly how it feels. And that's the key to a lot of this. If you feel like it's already happened, you're showing up with that energy.
it will happen. And I think where a lot of people get stumped is it doesn't happen right away. They
Yeah.
put something out there, it doesn't happen. But you said something before when the script didn't feel perfect, you put it off to the side and then you came back to it. I think that's really important. I think that's an
Yeah.
important part of the creative process is to not force it out, to just let it flow. And if it's not flowing, put it to the side. What was that moment when the clarity came? How were you able to write the script in just a week?
I think it was a couple weeks ago. My girlfriend was away for work. I remember just sitting there. I remember sitting there thinking on it and then why don't you reapproach it? And then it's like, why don't you go on to ChatGPT, which I did. I use it for all my content. I'm having a really sticking point with this film. And then I was like, can you mull over some things with me? And I was going through my whole story with it. In that conversation, it just came to me. I was like, maybe this is about me and my dad, rather than what happens when I break my silence, but from an angle of podcasting and writing the book and seeing that progression of the character's life. That stuff is left to the audience's imagination after the film's ended. They can go onto Google and see all that sort of stuff. We need to spend 90 minutes in the nitty gritty of the story, in the uncomfortableness of shame, of silence. This is a story that I need to write because it's uncomfortable thinking about. And it just flowed through me. So it's gone through 4 redrafts at the moment. It's going for a slight fifth redraft. The plan is to get this done by the end of the year, getting it out and submitting it to Cannes Film Festival next year. 100%. If we look at the shit that does well, it's the stories that are like this. It's the true stories. It's the things was okay, that's a tough watch. That was gritty. It's the films that spark conversations over dinner tables. I honestly believe that this film is going to do that because my story on social media has had over 50 million views so far. What's a film going to get? That's what gives me the belief to keep on moving forward with it.
I love your ambition with the film. I saw on the crowdfunding page, your goal is the 2026 Academy Awards. I saw that and I was like, wow, I believe it 100%. Just reading it, it seemed like it already happened. It's really inspiring, Perry, to hear all this, and I know it's really activating the people listening. I want to hear more about the crowdfunding so that the people listening know where the money is going towards. Could you tell us from a logistical standpoint where the money is going for the crowdfunding campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. So primarily, it's going to be done on a micro budget. We're aiming to get the film done on 100 grand, which is pounds. If the listeners are mostly US, then $130,000 roughly. That is all going to actually getting the cast and crew together. The the crew himself, the actors, the cast, the locations when you have to pay for licensing, accommodation for people who are traveling, and then film festival submissions. When you're submitting your stuff to actually seen at festivals, every single submission costs money. The bulk of the money is going to actually getting a good camera. Having someone with a good camera lens, because with not a good camera lens and it looks a bit like a student film, it depends on knowing what you want to create first. I want to create something that looks visually like you're going to the movie theaters to watch it. Even that's going to be a push at 100 grand. If we look at Nora, which won the Oscars last year, that was done on a couple $1 million budget, and that's a low budget for films. So we're talking 100 grand here. It's going to the people that are going to be coming together on this. And my goal is to have the whole cast and crew be survivors, not necessarily of intrafamilial abuse, but they've all lived in silence. If we can get a crew together like that, which I'm already attracting, then the film is going to be magical.
That's really powerful, and that's going to speak to a lot of people. The fact that the
Yeah.
whole crew went through that. And I think it's going to bring good energy into the film because the actors, it's going to have personal meaning and then they're going to promote it on their social media. They're going to rave about it. I love that. I can't believe you came up with that.
Once upon a time, I wanted to, and I still, in some ways, do a documentary where it's proper real life, going into survivors' homes and talking to abusers themselves within the family cycle. And when I was thinking about that documentary years ago, the cast and crew have to be survivors. That's carried through to this film. When we're talking to people about it, I'm like, yeah, we're all survivors. We're survivors that create a film for survivors. That's great.
That's astonishing. When you had the idea to create a film, it was exciting. And then you did some research and saw how expensive it was, but you didn't let that stop you. You overcame it. What was that
Mm.
initial reaction when you saw what this was going to take? Did that kind of stop you in your tracks, or did it motivate you more?
I know that money in the UK film industry gets you a lot further than it does in the US film industry. I don't have enough experience to know, but I know that's echoed a lot. So it does get you further in regards to a whole bunch of things across the cast and crew. But I knew it was going to cost a lot of money to get films together, and I wouldn't be able to do it on my own. My thing was, it's similar to when I did my book. I wrote my book in 30 days, but I didn't publish it for a year because I'm like, when I publish it, it needs to look like a proper book, like it from a bookstore, professional. When I pitched it and no one took it, I was like, okay, let me hire a company. I found out that's going to cost anywhere between 10 to 25 grand. At the time, I was broke, living on the floor in my old house, no furniture, hardly afford to eat. So I couldn't do that. I was too gripped on the perfectionism of getting it done that I didn't put the book out there. I was very wary of that about this film. I'm like, listen, you might not be able to get 5 million to get the film done in the way that you want it to. So how much would you get it done for? If I only raise 20 grand, I'm getting the film done on 20 grand. And I believe that the universe will take it wherever it needs to go. And if I'm only got 20 grand, there's a reason why. Before this call, I put out a story reel. And if that goes viral and brings in 100 grand of donations, then that was meant to happen. But if the video reel doesn't go viral and I only get £20 of donations, that was meant to happen. That's how I am with all of this. I am very motivated by the impossible. I was talking about the 2026 Academy Awards, and I was talking to the co-producer about it. And when we was looking about how Honora done it, Honora got their film to Cannes. It won Cannes, and then allowed them to have they secured about 16 to 18 million dollars from Cannes Film Festival, which all went into marketing the film and sending packages to Oscar voters. You're in the world of marketing, right? There's always a system, there's always something going on behind the scenes where you can use your skills, send these packages to Oscar voters, be like, hey, I'm not telling you to vote for my film, but I heard you like this. I'm like, okay, if we want it ends with me to get anywhere, how do we do this? If we follow the same suit, and I've learned the best way to go about it is to get it done for the Cannes Film Festival next year and then get it submitted to the Academy Awards next November, which means in theory, if it got somewhere, it would be at the 2027 Academy Awards. Found out that over 50% of the Oscars nominees were at Cannes. So I'm guessing that's the best shot to try and make it happen. Learning a lot as we go, but it doesn't pull me back. It just motivates me.
That doesn't stop you. The fact that you didn't know as much didn't stop you. You're like,
Yeah.
you know what? I'm just going to learn as I go. Universe is going to support me. It already happened. I think that's the
Yeah,
key.
yeah.
When things get hard, I always like to tell myself, you know what? This is going to be a story one day.
That's him.
You must feel
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
main character in a movie already.
Yeah, absolutely. I got main character energy
Mm,
100% of
I
the
see
time.
that. For the people listening, Perry, how could they support you with making this a reality?
To be blunt, it would be to contribute towards the film. I know a lot of time people think if I'm going to contribute, what's my £10 contribution going to do? But if a lot of you did a £10 contribution, it will make a big difference. Film it can literally only be done based on the contributions, which you can see from the fundraising campaign page. That's the only way it's going to happen. If you want to join the movement, you'll get a shout out, whether it's on the website or in the credits of the film, depending on what perk you want to get. And the perk is we've laid it out. So if you like want to contribute at 50 quid, you can buy the perk for 50 quid and see what you would get for that perk. If you want to join the movement to make this film happen, that would be contributing towards making that film happen, which you can do by clicking where you can go onto our website,
Put a link down
right?
below.
You can go on that or onto my Instagram. I'm very visible and I documented my journey. The link in my bio on Instagram will show you everything, like the fundraising campaign, the event that we're running in London in July for survivors, and our writing program too.
I will put all those links below to Perry's Instagram, the website for the campaign, the community. It'll all be down below. Last question for you, Perry. What does it personally mean for you to say that it ends with me?
It means that my dad didn't die for nothing. If I believe that he passed living in silence, the silence killed him, so that it doesn't kill anyone else. That's the attachment it ends with me. For
There's a lot of healing in that.
sure.
Healing. It's
That's
beautiful,
it.
Perry. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for being
thank
on
you.
the show and sharing this story.
No, thank you for giving me the platform.
Mhm.
Appreciate it, Harry.
Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you for the next Creators for Change episode.